Thunder's scarred leg trembled as he faced the millionaire's gleaming thoroughbred, drawing pitying whispers from a crowd that believed the injured ranch horse didn't belong in the same arena. Seconds later, those same voices fell into stunned silence as the scoreboard flashed a time nobody thought possible, proving that heart could triumph where money had failed. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Morgan family ranch sat nestled in the rolling hills of Montana, a modest stretch of land that had been in the family for 3 generations. Unlike the sprawling estates that dominated the landscape these days, the Morgan place was small but cherished, a testament to hard work and simple living. The weathered barn with its faded red paint and the modest 2-story farmhouse told a story of persistence against the odds. Sarah Morgan stood at the fence line of the training corral, her eyes fixed on Thunder, the chestnut quarter horse that had been her companion since she was 14. Now at 26, Sarah had grown into a capable horsewoman, known throughout the county for her gentle training methods and remarkable connection with the animals she worked with. But Thunder was special. He wasn't just a horse. He was her partner, her confidant, the one constant in a life that had seen its share of struggles. "Come on, Thunder, that's it," she encouraged as the horse trotted around the corral, his muscular frame moving with a grace that belied his 12 years. Thunder's ears flicked back at the sound of her voice, and he adjusted his pace, responding to her command without hesitation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the land as Sarah's father, Jack Morgan, emerged from the barn. At 62, Jack still moved with purpose, though the years of hard labor had left their mark on his weathered face and calloused hands. He approached the fence and leaned against it, watching his daughter work with Thunder. "He's looking good today," Jack remarked, his voice carrying the slight raspiness that had developed over the years. "That new training regimen you've been trying seems to be working." Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving Thunder. "He's getting stronger every day. I think he might be ready for the county competition next month." Jack's expression grew serious. "You sure about that? After what happened last year?" The unfinished sentence hung in the air between them, a painful reminder of the accident that had nearly cost Thunder his life. During a qualifying round at last year's rodeo, Thunder had stumbled during a barrel race, tearing a ligament in his right front leg. The injury had been severe, and many, including the local vet, had suggested that putting him down might be the kindest option, but Sarah had refused. "I know, Dad," she said quietly, "but you've seen how far he's come. Dr. Parker said his recovery is nothing short of miraculous." Jack nodded, though concern still lingered in his eyes. "Just don't push him too hard, that's all I'm saying." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. A sleek black SUV was making its way up the gravel driveway, dust billowing behind it. It was an unusual sight at the Morgan Ranch. They rarely received visitors, especially ones driving vehicles that probably cost more than their entire property. "Were you expecting someone?" Jack asked, straightening up. Sarah shook her head, her brow furrowing. "No, but whoever it is, they're definitely lost. Nobody comes up this way unless they're heading to the Morgan place." The SUV came to a stop near the house, and a man stepped out. Even from a distance, Sarah could tell he wasn't from around here. His tailored suit and polished appearance stood in stark contrast to the rustic surroundings of the ranch. The stranger adjusted his sunglasses and surveyed the property with an air of assessment that immediately put Sarah on edge. "I'll go see what he wants," Jack said, already moving toward the visitor. Sarah gave Thunder a final pat and followed her father, curiosity and wariness mingling in her chest. As they approached, the stranger removed his sunglasses, revealing keen blue eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. "Mr. Morgan?" the man inquired, extending a hand toward Jack. "I'm Richard Prescott," I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in Bill Harkins. Jack accepted the handshake, recognition dawning on his face. Bill Harkins was the county commissioner, a man whose family had deep roots in the area. Bill mentioned you might be coming by, Jack said, though his tone suggested this was news to him. What can we do for you, Mr. Prescott? Richard Prescott smiled, a practiced gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. Please call me Richard. I've recently acquired property in the area and am looking to expand my equestrian interests. Bill spoke highly of your family's knowledge of horses, particularly your daughter's skill as a trainer. His gaze shifted to Sarah, appraising her with a look that made her feel like she was being evaluated. You must be Sarah. I've heard impressive things about your work with quarter horses. Sarah nodded, keeping her expression neutral. Nice to meet you, Mr. Prescott. I'll get right to the point, Prescott continued. I'm looking to establish a presence in the local rodeo circuit. I've already acquired several promising horses, including a thoroughbred named Monarch that I believe has exceptional potential. What I need now is someone who understands the local scene, someone who can help me navigate the competitions and ensure my investment pays off. The way he spoke about horses as investments rather than living beings immediately put Sarah off, but she kept her thoughts to herself. Jack, ever the diplomat, gestured toward the house. Why don't we continue this conversation inside? Sarah can tell you about the local competitions, and I can fill you in on the history of rodeo in these parts. As they walked toward the house, Sarah glanced back at Thunder, who was watching them from the corral. There was something about Richard Prescott that unsettled her, a coldness beneath the polished exterior that set off warning bells in her mind. But curiosity won out, and she followed her father and their unexpected visitor into the house. Inside, seated at the worn kitchen table that had hosted countless Morgan family meals, Richard Prescott seemed even more out of place. His manicured hands rested on the wooden surface as he outlined his plans in precise detail. I've invested considerably in this venture, he explained. Monarch is a champion bloodline, bred for speed and agility. I've hired top trainers from across the country, but I need someone who understands the local circuit, the judges, the unique challenges of competing in this region. Sarah listened, her skepticism growing with each word. Mr. Prescott, rodeo isn't just about having the fastest or most expensive horse. It's about the bond between rider and animal, about trust and understanding built over years. Prescott waved a dismissive hand. With all due respect, Ms. Morgan, I've succeeded in every industry I've entered by understanding that excellence is a product of investment and strategy. The emotional aspects, while charming, are secondary to proper resources and training methods. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt a flash of indignation. Before she could respond, Jack interjected, his tone carefully measured. Everyone has their methods, Mr. Prescott. Around here, we've found that respecting the animal and building that trust leads to the best results. Prescott nodded, though it was clear he was merely being polite. Of course. Regardless, I'm interested in hiring you, Sarah, as a consultant. Your knowledge of the local circuit would be invaluable, and I'm prepared to offer a generous compensation package. Sarah hesitated, caught off guard by the offer. The Morgan Ranch had been struggling financially for years, a reality that kept her awake more nights than she cared to admit. The extra income would be a godsend, allowing them to make necessary repairs and perhaps even expand their breeding program. But something about Prescott and his approach to horses felt fundamentally wrong to her. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Prescott, but I'm focused on preparing Thunder for the upcoming season. After his injury last year, he needs my full attention. Prescott's eyebrows rose slightly. Thunder? That's your horse, I assume? The one in the corral? Sarah nodded. Yes, he's recovering from a serious injury, but he's making remarkable progress. And you intend to compete with him? Prescott asked, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. After a serious injury? If he's ready, yes, Sarah replied, her chin lifting slightly in defiance. We've been working together for years. I know what he's capable of. Prescott studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Well, that's certainly admirable. Perhaps we could discuss an alternative arrangement. I'd still like to benefit from your expertise, even if it's on a more limited basis. The conversation continued, with Prescott outlining various proposals and Jack occasionally interjecting with questions about Prescott's background and experience with horses. Throughout it all, Sarah found herself increasingly uncomfortable with the businessman's clinical approach to what was, for her, a deeply personal pursuit. As the meeting concluded and Prescott prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Think about my offer, Sarah. The rodeo circuit can be a costly endeavor, especially with a horse recovering from injury. My resources could make things considerably easier for you and your father. After Prescott departed, Sarah stood on the porch, watching the black SUV disappear down the dusty road. Jack joined her, his expression thoughtful. "What do you think, Dad?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Jack sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I think Richard Prescott is used to getting what he wants, and I think he doesn't understand the first thing about what makes a champion in the rodeo." Sarah nodded, a sense of resolve settling over her. Then maybe it's time someone showed him. In the weeks following Richard Prescott's visit, news of his arrival spread through the county like wildfire. Stories of his state-of-the-art training facility imported from Europe and his champion Thoroughbred Monarch became the talk of every diner and feed store. Some welcomed the attention and investment he brought to the area. Others, like Sarah, remained skeptical of his intentions and methods. One crisp morning, as Sarah led Thunder through his therapy exercises in the shallow pond behind the barn, Emma Collins, her childhood friend, and now the local veterinary assistant, pulled up in her mud-splattered pickup truck. "I thought I'd find you two out here," Emma called, climbing out of the truck with a medical bag in hand. Her red hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her freckled face broke into a wide smile at the sight of Thunder standing confidently in the water. "Look at you, big guy. You're practically prancing now." Sarah smiled, the pride evident in her eyes. "He's come a long way. The water therapy has been working wonders for his strength and flexibility." Emma waded into the pond, her trained eye assessing Thunder's movements as he lifted each leg through the resistance of the water. "I can see that. Dr. Parker is going to be impressed with his progress." As Emma conducted her routine checkup on Thunder, Sarah couldn't help but ask about the gossip that had been circulating. "So, have you heard anything more about Prescott and his operation?" Emma's expression shifted, her professional demeanor giving way to a hint of indignation. "Have I ever? I was over at the Henderson place yesterday treating one of their mares, and Rob Henderson couldn't stop talking about it. Apparently Prescott's bought out the old Wilson property and transformed it practically overnight. Imported trainers, custom-built stables, the works." "And Monarch?" Sarah asked, unable to suppress her curiosity about the competition. Emma's eyes widened. "That's the craziest part. Rob says Prescott paid over $100,000 for that horse. It's a former racehorse with an impressive pedigree, but from what I've heard, it's never even run a rodeo circuit." Sarah frowned, absently stroking Thunder's neck. "That doesn't make sense. Racing thoroughbreds aren't typically suited for rodeo events. Their training and breeding are focused on different skills entirely." "Well, apparently Prescott thinks money can overcome any obstacle," Emma replied with a shrug. "He's hired some hotshot trainer from Texas who specializes in converting racehorses for other disciplines. The word is they're focusing on barrel racing for the county rodeo, the same event Sarah had been training Thunder for. The coincidence seemed too perfect. and Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Prescott had specifically chosen that event after learning of her plans. "Thunder's looking great, by the way," Emma added, changing the subject as she completed her examination. "His muscle tone has improved significantly, and there's almost no swelling around the injury site. I'd say he's about 80% recovered." Sarah felt a surge of hope. "Do you think he'll be ready for the competition next month?" Emma hesitated, her professional caution battling with her desire to encourage her friend. "It's hard to say for certain. He's healing remarkably well, but competing at that level so soon after such a severe injury, it's risky, Sarah." "I know," Sarah admitted, leading Thunder out of the pond and onto the grassy bank. "But you know how important this is. The prize money from the county rodeo would help us keep the ranch going, and after what happened last year..." She trailed off, the memory of Thunder's accident still painful. Emma nodded sympathetically. "Just promise me you'll listen to him, not just your determination. If he shows any signs of pain or fatigue, you'll pull back." "I promise," Sarah agreed, knowing her friend was right. No competition was worth risking Thunder's well-being. "And thanks for coming out today. I appreciate it." As Emma prepared to leave, she paused by her truck. "Oh, I almost forgot. There's a new training session happening at the community arena this weekend. A lot of the local competitors will be there. Might be a good opportunity to see where Thunder stands compared to the others." Sarah nodded, already mentally adjusting her schedule. "We'll be there." After Emma departed, Sarah spent the rest of the morning working with Thunder, carefully guiding him through exercises designed to build his strength without straining his healing leg. As they worked, her mind kept drifting back to Richard Prescott and his Thoroughbred. The thought of competing against a horse worth more than her entire ranch was intimidating. But there was something else that bothered her even more, the idea that someone could view these magnificent animals as mere investments, tools for status and profit, rather than partners worthy of respect and care. That Saturday, Sarah arrived at the community arena early, wanting to give Thunder time to acclimate to the environment before the other horses and riders arrived. The arena was a modest facility compared to the professional venues in larger cities, but it had served the local community well for decades. The dirt ring was well maintained, the wooden bleachers weathered but sturdy, and the atmosphere was always one of friendly competition and mutual support. As Sarah led Thunder around the perimeter, allowing him to stretch his legs and get comfortable with the surroundings, she noticed a commotion at the entrance. A gleaming horse trailer, easily worth more than most of the vehicles in the parking lot combined, had pulled up. Even from a distance, the Prescott Equestrian logo was visible on its side, a stylized P intertwined with a horse silhouette. Sarah's stomach tightened as she watched several men in matching uniforms unload a magnificent black thoroughbred. Monarch was even more impressive in person than she had imagined. Tall and muscular, with a gleaming coat that caught the morning sun like polished obsidian, the horse moved with the natural grace of an athlete, powerful and confident. Richard Prescott emerged from a luxury SUV parked beside the trailer, now dressed in equestrian attire that somehow managed to look both professional and untouched by actual work. Beside him was a lean, hard-faced man, whom Sarah assumed must be the Texas trainer Emma had mentioned. As if sensing her gaze, Prescott looked up and spotted Sarah. A smile that didn't quite reach his eyes spread across his face, and he made his way toward her, the trainer following a step behind. "Sarah Morgan," Prescott called, his voice carrying across the arena. "I was hoping you'd be here today. I've been looking forward to seeing the famous Thunder in action." Sarah straightened her shoulders, conscious of the contrast between her worn jeans and faded chambray shirt and Prescott's pristine attire. "Mr. Prescott, I see you've brought your new project." Prescott's smile widened. "Indeed. Allow me to introduce Monarch, and this is Diego Vasquez, one of the finest horse trainers in the country." Diego nodded curtly, his eyes assessing Thunder with a professional scrutiny. "Nice quarter horse," he commented, his tone neutral. "Recovering from an injury, I hear." Sarah bristled at the directness of the question but kept her composure. "Yes, he is, and making remarkable progress." "Glad to hear it," Prescott said smoothly. "Nothing like a good comeback story to add excitement to a competition. Although..." He paused, his gaze lingering on Thunder's right front leg. "It would be understandable if you decided to wait another year. No one would think less of you for putting your horse's welfare first." The concern in his voice sounded genuine, but Sarah detected an undertone that suggested something else, perhaps a hope that she would indeed withdraw, removing one competitor from the field. "Thunder and I will be ready," she replied firmly, "but I appreciate your concern." Prescott nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well then, may the best horse win." With that, he turned and walked back toward Monarch, Diego at his side, already discussing training strategies in low, urgent tones. Sarah watched them go, a mix of emotions churning within her. Determination, certainly, but also a nagging doubt. Monarch was a magnificent animal, backed by resources she could only dream of. Could Thunder, still recovering from an injury that had nearly ended his life, truly compete against such an opponent? As if sensing her uncertainty, Thunder nudged her shoulder gently with his muzzle. Sarah turned to meet his intelligent gaze, finding in those deep brown eyes the same steadfast partnership that had carried them through countless challenges. "You're right," she whispered, stroking his forehead. "It's not about the money or the bloodlines, it's about heart, and you've got more heart than any horse I've ever known." The community training session was in full swing by mid-morning. Local riders took turns running their horses through practice patterns, offering each other advice and encouragement. This was the heart of rodeo country, a place where competition existed alongside camaraderie, where rivals on the circuit were neighbors and friends beyond it. Sarah watched from the sidelines as Diego put Monarch through his paces. The thoroughbred's speed was undeniable, his long legs eating up the distance between barrels with powerful strides. Yet something about the horse's movement struck Sarah as mechanical, almost reluctant. Monarch responded to Diego's commands with precision, but without the eager partnership Sarah had always believed was the foundation of true rodeo success. "He's fast," Jack commented, appearing at Sarah's side. He had arrived late, having finished the morning chores at the ranch. "But he's fighting the bit on those turns." Sarah nodded, noting the same tension in Monarch's frame. "He's running the pattern because he's been trained to, not because he understands it. Look at his ears. They're pinned back almost the whole time." Jack's weathered face creased in a frown. "Prescott's got himself a racehorse, all right, but barrel racing isn't just about speed. That horse doesn't trust his rider, and on those tight turns, that's going to cost him." Their conversation was interrupted by Diego's sharp command as Monarch balked at the final turn, nearly colliding with the barrel. Prescott, watching from the edge of the arena, stepped forward with a tight expression. "He needs more time," they heard Diego say, his voice carrying in the now quiet arena. "Converting a racehorse to barrel racing can't be rushed, Mr. Prescott. Monarch is still thinking like a thoroughbred on a track." Prescott's response was too low to hear, but his displeasure was evident in the rigid set of his shoulders. After a brief, tense exchange, Diego dismounted and led Monarch toward the trailer, the session apparently over for them. "Your turn, Sarah," called Maggie Wilson, the unofficial coordinator of these community sessions. "Let's see how Thunder's doing today." Sarah led Thunder into the arena, acutely aware of the curious gazes following them. Everyone knew about Thunder's injury from the previous year, and many had expressed doubts about his ability to compete again, especially at the level required for the county rodeo. Those doubts had only intensified with the arrival of Prescott and his expensive thoroughbred. As she mounted, Sarah felt a familiar surge of confidence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this moment, connected with Thunder, preparing to ride as one, was where she belonged. She leaned forward, whispering in his ear, "Easy does it, boy. Let's show them how far we've come." Thunder responded with a gentle toss of his head as if eager to begin. Sarah guided him to the starting position, took a deep breath, and gave the signal. Thunder launched forward, his powerful quarters driving them toward the first barrel. Sarah could feel him testing his injured leg, gauging his own strength with each stride. She kept her cues light, trusting him to find his balance. They approached the first barrel, and Sarah felt Thunder gather himself for the turn. It was the moment of truth, the same maneuver that had led to his injury the year before. She held her breath as Thunder made his decision, then exhaled in relief as he executed a smooth, controlled turn, favoring his right leg slightly, but maintaining his speed. "That's it, Thunder," she murmured, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "You've got this." They completed the pattern with no mistakes, though at a pace somewhat slower than Thunder's pre-injury times. As they crossed the invisible finish line, a cheer erupted from the assembled locals. Jack's face broke into a wide grin, and even Maggie, who had seen countless runs in her decades of involvement with Rodeo, looked impressed. "Not bad for a horse who was nearly put down," she commented as Sarah brought Thunder to a halt beside her. "He's moving well, Sarah. You've done good work with him." Sarah patted Thunder's neck, feeling the warmth of his exertion beneath her palm. "He's done the work. I've just been there to help." As she dismounted, Sarah noticed Prescott watching from the far side of the arena, his expression unreadable. Despite his earlier departure, he had apparently stayed to observe her run. She wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or unsettled by his scrutiny. Later, as Sarah was cooling Thunder down, walking him slowly around the perimeter of the arena, Prescott approached. His designer boots were already dusty from the arena dirt, a detail that gave Sarah a small, petty satisfaction. "Impressive," he said, falling into step beside her, "especially considering what he's been through. You've clearly got a gift with horses, Sarah." "Thank you," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Thunder's a fighter. He always has been." Prescott nodded, studying Thunder with new interest. "I can see that, which makes my proposition even more relevant." He paused, ensuring he had her attention. "I'd like to buy him." Sarah stopped in her tracks, staring at Prescott in disbelief. "Excuse me?" "I'm offering to buy Thunder," Prescott repeated, as if she simply hadn't heard him. "After watching him today, I can see his potential. With my resources and Diego's expertise, we could take him to levels you simply can't reach here." He named a figure that made Sarah's breath catch, enough money to pay off the ranch's outstanding debts and secure its future for years to come. "Thunder's not for sale," she said firmly, once she'd recovered from the shock. "Not at any price." Prescott's expression hardened slightly. "Everyone has a price, Ms. Morgan. Perhaps you should discuss it with your father before dismissing the offer so quickly. I understand the ranch has been struggling financially." The implication that she was being selfish, putting her attachment to Thunder above her family's well-being, stung more than Sarah wanted to admit. But she knew in her heart that selling Thunder would be a betrayal of everything she believed in, everything she and the horse had worked for together. "My father would say the same thing," she replied, meeting Prescott's gaze steadily. "Thunder is family, Mr. Prescott. He's not a commodity to be bought and sold." A flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps irritation, crossed Prescott's face. "The offer stands," he said after a moment, "until the county rodeo. Think about it, Sarah. Think about what that money could mean for your family, for your ranch." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah with a knot of conflicting emotions in her chest. The amount he had offered was life-changing, the kind of money that could solve the Morgan family's financial worries in an instant. Yet the very fact that he thought she could be persuaded to sell Thunder revealed how fundamentally different their values were. As she watched Prescott return to his team, Sarah's resolve hardened. The county rodeo had suddenly become about much more than prize money or personal achievement. It was about proving that the bond between horse and rider, built on trust and mutual respect, was worth more than all the money and resources in the world. "We're going to win this thing, Thunder," she whispered, stroking his neck. "Not for the money, not for the glory, but to show everyone what really matters in this sport." Thunder snorted softly, as if in agreement, and Sarah smiled. The road ahead would be challenging, and the competition fierce, but with Thunder by her side, she was ready to face whatever came their way. That evening, as Sarah recounted Prescott's offer to her father, she was relieved to see Jack's immediate dismissal of the idea. "Some things aren't for sale," he said simply, echoing her own sentiment. "And Thunder's one of them." The decision made, Sarah threw herself into preparation for the county rodeo with renewed determination. Each day, she and Thunder worked together, gradually increasing the intensity of their training while carefully monitoring his recovering leg. There were setbacks, days when Thunder seemed sore or tired, when the old injury made itself known, but there was also progress, moments when the connection between them felt stronger than ever, when Thunder moved with a confidence that belied his traumatic past. And all the while, news of Prescott's training methods filtered through the local grapevine. Stories of long, grueling sessions, of Monarch being pushed to his limits and beyond, of Diego's increasingly frustrated attempts to force the Thoroughbred into a discipline for which he showed little natural aptitude. 2 weeks before the county rodeo, disaster struck. Sarah woke to find Thunder standing awkwardly in his stall, refusing to put weight on his right front leg, the same one that had been injured the previous year. Her heart sank as she gently ran her hands down the leg, feeling the heat and swelling around the old injury site. "No, no, no," she whispered, fighting back tears. "Not now, Thunder. We've come so far." Jack found her there an hour later, still sitting in the straw beside Thunder, her face etched with worry. One look told him everything he needed to know. "I'll call Emma," he said quietly, placing a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulder before heading back to the house. The morning stretched endlessly as Sarah waited for Emma to arrive. Thunder remained stoic, occasionally shifting his weight but clearly in discomfort. Sarah stayed with him, speaking in soft, reassuring tones, though whether she was comforting the horse or herself was hard to say. When Emma finally pulled up, her expression was serious as she examined Thunder's leg. "The ligament's inflamed," she concluded after a thorough examination. "It's not torn again, thank goodness, but he's definitely strained it. Has he been doing more intense work lately?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "We've been pushing a bit harder with the rodeo coming up. I thought he was ready." Emma's eyes were sympathetic but frank. "Sarah, ligament injuries are tricky. They can seem fully healed on the surface, but it takes a long time for them to regain their former strength. Thunder's made incredible progress, but he's still vulnerable to re-injury." "What does this mean for the rodeo?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Emma sighed. "If you want my professional opinion, he needs at least 3 weeks of rest. No training, no competition, just gentle walking to keep him from getting stiff." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 3 weeks would put them well past the date of the county rodeo. All their preparation, all Thunder's hard-fought progress would be for nothing. Worse, Prescott would see it as vindication of his methods, proof that sentiment had no place in professional competition. "There has to be something we can do," Sarah insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Anti-inflammatories, therapy, anything." Emma shook her head firmly. "This isn't something you can shortcut, Sarah. Push him now, and you risk permanent damage. Is one competition worth risking his entire future? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Of course, Thunder's well-being came first. It always had. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Not just because of the competition itself, but because of what it represented. A chance to prove that their approach to horsemanship, built on patience and mutual respect, could stand against Prescott's cold efficiency and unlimited resources. After Emma left, having administered an anti-inflammatory injection and left strict instructions for Thunder's care, Sarah sat alone in the barn, the weight of disappointment heavy on her shoulders. Jack found her there, staring blankly at Thunder's stall. "Emma filled me in," he said, settling onto a hay bale beside her. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know how much this meant to you." Sarah nodded, too disheartened to speak. Her father's weathered hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You know," he said after a moment, "your mother used to say that setbacks are just the universe's way of testing how badly we want something." The mention of her mother, who had passed away when Sarah was just 15, brought a fresh wave of emotion. Catherine Morgan had been a barrel racer herself, and her love for horses had been passed down to her daughter like a precious inheritance. "She also used to say that no competition is worth risking a good horse," Sarah replied softly. Jack smiled, the memories bittersweet. "That she did. Your mother was wise that way. She understood that the bond between rider and horse was sacred, something to be protected above all else." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the quiet of the barn broken only by the occasional rustle of hay as Thunder shifted in his stall. "We'll withdraw from the rodeo," Sarah finally said, her voice steady despite the disappointment coursing through her. "Thunder's health comes first. Always has, always will." Jack nodded, pride evident in his eyes. "That's my girl. And don't worry, there will be other competitions. Thunder's young yet, and with proper care he'll come back stronger than ever." The news of Thunder's setback and Sarah's withdrawal from the county rodeo spread quickly through the local community. Messages of sympathy and support poured in, testament to the respect the Morgans had earned over generations. But there were also whispers, suggestions that perhaps Sarah had been foolish to think she could compete against someone like Prescott, that she had pushed Thunder too hard too soon in a misguided attempt to prove something. Sarah did her best to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on Thunder's recovery. As Emma had instructed, she limited him to gentle walks, careful to avoid any strain on his healing leg. Each day brought small improvements, less heat in the affected area, more willingness to bear weight. But the rodeo date loomed like a shadow, a reminder of what might have been. 3 days before the competition, Sarah was surprised by a visit from Maggie Wilson, the community training coordinator, who had known Sarah since she was a child learning to ride on her first pony. "Thought I'd check in on our patient," Maggie announced, following Sarah to Thunder's stall. The older woman observed the horse with a practiced eye, noting his improved stance and the clear, alert quality of his gaze. "He's looking better." Sarah nodded. "The rest has done him good. Emma thinks he'll make a full recovery if we're patient." Maggie made a non-committal sound, continuing her assessment. After a moment, she turned to Sarah with an expression that suggested she was weighing her words carefully. "You know, there's been quite a buzz about Prescott and Monarch. He's been making quite a show of their training sessions, inviting people to watch. The local paper even did a feature on him yesterday." Sarah tried not to show how much this stung. "Well, good for him. I hope he puts on a good show at the rodeo." Maggie's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's just it. I'm not sure he will. Oh, Monarch is fast, no doubt about that. But something's not right with that horse. The way Prescott and Diego are pushing him." She shook her head. "I've been around horses my whole life, and I know when an animal is being asked to do something it's not ready for." Sarah frowned, her concern for Monarch momentarily overshadowing her own disappointment. "What do you mean?" "Barrel racing requires a horse to make tight, controlled turns at high speed. It's not just about running fast. It's about balance, agility, and trust between horse and rider. Monarch's a thoroughbred, bred for straight-line speed on a track. His body isn't built for those sharp turns, and from what I've seen, his mind isn't there either. He's fighting Diego every step of the way." "That doesn't sound like a recipe for success," Sarah commented. Maggie's expression was grim. "It's not. But Prescott isn't the type to accept failure. He's determined to win at any cost, and I'm worried about what that might mean for Monarch." The implication hung in the air between them. In the world of rodeo, as in any competitive sport involving animals, there were those who would resort to questionable methods to ensure victory, methods that prioritized results over welfare. "Surely he wouldn't," Sarah began, then stopped. The truth was, she didn't know what Prescott would or wouldn't do. She had seen enough of his character to understand that winning meant everything to him, that horses were investments rather than partners, tools to be used rather than beings to be respected. "Just keep your eyes open at the rodeo," Maggie advised, patting Sarah's arm. "And don't count yourself out just yet. Sometimes the universe has a way of evening the score." As Maggie departed, Sarah was left with a troubled mind. Her concern for Thunder now extended to Monarch as well, a horse who had no choice in the demands being placed upon him, who was being forced into a discipline for which he showed little natural aptitude, all to satisfy the ego of a man who saw victory as his due. The county rodeo was no longer just a competition Sarah would miss. It was becoming a stage for a confrontation of values, a test of what truly mattered in the relationship between humans and horses. And despite her withdrawal, Sarah realized she needed to be there, to bear witness to whatever unfolded. The day of the county rodeo dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect summer morning that seemed designed for outdoor competition. Despite her decision to withdraw, Sarah found herself drawn to the fairgrounds, unable to stay away from the event she had spent months preparing for. Jack offered to accompany her, but she declined, needing the space to process her disappointment on her own. The county rodeo had always been one of the highlights of the year for the local community. Families gathered with picnic baskets and lawn chairs. Children ran excitedly between food vendors and game booths, and competitors arrived with horse trailers in tow, ready to test their skills against friends and neighbors. The atmosphere was festive, a celebration of rural life and traditions that had endured for generations. Sarah parked in the crowded lot and made her way toward the main arena, where the barrel racing event would take place later that afternoon. She had no official business there, but she felt compelled to witness the competition she had been forced to abandon, to see firsthand what Prescott and his thoroughbred would bring to the arena. As she walked, she was greeted by familiar faces, fellow competitors offering sympathetic words about Thunder's condition, local ranchers expressing hopes for his recovery, children who had grown up admiring her riding skills. The support was touching, but it also underscored what she had lost: the chance to compete, to test herself and Thunder against the best the county had to offer. Near the warm-up area, Sarah spotted Prescott's elaborate setup. Unlike the modest trailers and simple equipment most competitors used, Prescott had created a professional-looking staging area with a branded tent, specialized training equipment, and a team of assistants bustling around. Monarch was being prepared for his run, and even from a distance Sarah could see that something was wrong. The magnificent thoroughbred was tossing his head repeatedly, fighting against the handler who was trying to fit him with protective leg wraps. His eyes were wide, showing too much white, a clear sign of stress in horses. Diego, standing nearby with Prescott, looked tense, his body language suggesting that he was not entirely comfortable with whatever was being discussed. Sarah's instinct was to keep her distance to avoid any interaction with Prescott or his team, but her concern for Monarch overrode her caution, and she found herself moving closer, trying to understand what was happening. As she approached, she caught fragments of the conversation between Prescott and Diego, their voices lowered but intense. "Don't care what it takes," Prescott was saying, his face flushed with what might have been excitement or anger. "He needs to perform today. The investors will be watching." Diego's response was harder to hear, but his expression was troubled. "Pushing too hard could be dangerous." "I didn't invest all this money to come in second," Prescott cut him off. "Use whatever methods you need, just make sure he's ready." Sarah's stomach knotted with apprehension. The exchange confirmed her worst fears about Prescott's approach, winning at any cost, regardless of the consequences for the animal under his control. She was about to turn away when Prescott spotted her, his expression shifting instantly from irritation to polished charm. "Sarah Morgan," he called, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. "I didn't expect to see you here today. How's Thunder doing?" Sarah hesitated, then decided directness was the best approach. "He's resting. His recovery is going well, but it'll take time." She glanced at Monarch, who was still resisting the handlers. "Your horse seems upset." Prescott waved a dismissive hand. "Pre-competition nerves. Nothing to worry about. Monarch is a professional. He knows what's expected of him." The way he spoke of the Thoroughbred, as if the animal were a machine programmed to perform on command rather than a living, feeling creature, deepened Sarah's disquiet. "Horses aren't professionals, Mr. Prescott," she said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "They're animals with instincts and limitations. Pushing them beyond those limits isn't just unfair, it's dangerous." Prescott's smile tightened, the veneer of friendliness wearing thin. "I appreciate your concern, Ms. Morgan, but I think I'll trust Diego's expertise over the advice of someone who couldn't even keep her own horse sound for competition." The barb struck home, but Sarah refused to show how much it hurt. "That's exactly my point. I listened to Thunder when he needed rest. I put his well-being above my desire to compete." She looked pointedly at Monarch, who had finally been fitted with the leg wraps, but was still showing clear signs of distress. "Can you say the same?" Before Prescott could respond, a commotion erupted near the main tent. Monarch, apparently spooked by something, had reared up suddenly, nearly striking one of the handlers with his front hooves. Diego rushed forward, speaking in low, urgent tones as he tried to calm the agitated horse. Prescott's face darkened with anger. "Control that animal," he snapped, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We're not paying you to let him run the show." Diego shot him a look that mingled frustration and resignation before turning his attention back to Monarch. Sarah watched as the trainer managed to settle the Thoroughbred, though the horse continued to tremble, his skin twitching as if plagued by invisible flies. "That horse isn't ready for this," Sarah said quietly, her words meant for Prescott alone. "He's telling you as clearly as he can, but you're not listening." Prescott turned to her, his composure slipping to reveal the hard, driven man beneath. "I didn't get where I am by listening to excuses or accepting failure. Monarch will perform today, and he will win. That's what I bought him for, and that's what he'll deliver." The cold certainty in his voice sent a chill through Sarah. This wasn't just about a county rodeo anymore. It was about a fundamental clash of philosophies, a battle over what constituted right relationship between humans and the animals in their care. "Good luck today, Mr. Prescott," she said, stepping back. "I hope for Monarch's sake that you get what you want without it costing more than you're prepared to pay." She walked away, her mind troubled by what she had witnessed. As she made her way to the stands, finding a seat among the growing crowd of spectators, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with Monarch. something beyond the normal stress of competition. The barrel racing event was scheduled for mid-afternoon, following the calf roping and team penning competitions. Sarah watched these earlier events with only half her attention, her thoughts continually drifting to Thunder, resting back at the ranch, and to Monarch, being prepared for a performance his body and mind seemed ill-equipped to deliver. Around her, the buzz of conversation frequently turned to Prescott and his Thoroughbred. Opinions seemed divided, some spectators excited by the prospect of seeing a high-dollar horse in action, others skeptical of a newcomer trying to buy his way into rodeo success. Sarah listened without comment, unwilling to contribute to the gossip, but unable to ignore her growing sense of foreboding. As the barrel racing competition approached, she spotted Emma making her way through the crowded stands. Her friend's unexpected appearance was a welcome distraction from her troubled thoughts. "I thought you might be here," Emma said, settling into the seat beside Sarah. "How are you holding up?" Sarah shrugged, trying for nonchalance. "I'm fine. Just here to support the other competitors." Emma's knowing look suggested she wasn't fooled. "And to see how Prescott's horse performs, I'm guessing." "That too," Sarah admitted. "I saw them in the warm-up area earlier. Monarch was not in a good place, stressed, fighting the handlers, and Prescott was pushing Diego to do whatever it takes to make him perform." Emma frowned, her professional concern evident. "That's troubling, especially for a horse being asked to do something he's not bred for." They fell silent as the announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling the first barrel racing competitor to the gate. The crowd cheered as a local rider entered the arena, her Palomino quarter horse alert and ready, clearly comfortable with the familiar environment. "I should be there," Sarah said quietly, the reality of her absence from the competition hitting her anew as she watched the rider begin her run. "Thunder and I were ready, or at least I thought we were." Emma squeezed her arm sympathetically. "You did the right thing, Sarah. Pushing him would have risked everything you've worked for." Sarah nodded, knowing her friend was right but still feeling the keen edge of disappointment. As she watched rider after rider complete the cloverleaf pattern around the three barrels, she couldn't help but imagine herself and Thunder in the arena, executing the turns they had practiced so diligently. And then, it was Monarch's turn. A hush fell over the crowd as Monarch entered the arena, his black coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Even to casual observers, the Thoroughbred was a magnificent animal, tall and powerful, with the lean, muscular build of a natural athlete. Diego sat astride him, his posture tense but controlled, his expression focused with the intensity of a professional who knew exactly what was at stake. From her seat in the stands, Sarah could see that Monarch was still showing signs of distress. His ears flicked back and forth rapidly, his nostrils flared, and there was a tightness to his movements that spoke of barely contained energy, not the eager anticipation of a horse ready to perform, but the nervous tension of one on the edge of flight or fight. "Something's not right," she murmured to Emma, who nodded in agreement, her trained eye picking up the same concerning signals. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeaker, introducing Richard Prescott's Monarch, a champion thoroughbred making his debut in the barrel racing circuit. A smattering of applause greeted the announcement, though Sarah noticed many of the local ranchers and longtime rodeo participants remained silent, watching with the same wary assessment she felt. At the starting line, Diego gathered the reins, centering Monarch between his legs. The thoroughbred sidestepped nervously, fighting the bit, but Diego's firm hand brought him back to position. There was a moment of stillness, of held breath throughout the arena, and then the buzzer sounded. Monarch exploded from the starting line with breathtaking speed, his long legs covering ground in powerful strides that no quarter horse could match. The crowd gasped at the sheer velocity of his approach to the first barrel. This was thoroughbred speed, the legacy of generations bred for the racetrack, and for a moment, it seemed that Prescott's unconventional choice might be vindicated. But as Monarch reached the first barrel, the flaw in the strategy became immediately apparent. The Thoroughbred, trained to run in a straight line or in wide, sweeping turns, was unprepared for the tight, controlled pivot required to navigate around the barrel at speed. Diego pulled hard on the reins, trying to guide the horse into the turn, but Monarch resisted, his body fighting against the unnatural movement. At the last second, he swerved, barely avoiding a collision with the barrel, but executing a turn that was wide and ungainly, costing precious seconds. The crowd murmured, sensing the struggle between horse and rider. Prescott, standing at the edge of the arena, visibly tensed, his hands clenched at his sides. Monarch recovered on the straightaway to the second barrel, again demonstrating impressive speed, but the pattern repeated. Resistance to the turn, a battle of wills between Diego and the horse, and another wide, inefficient circle around the barrel. By the time they approached the final barrel, Monarch was clearly agitated, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "He's going to hit it," Sarah predicted, her heart in her throat despite her conflicted feelings about Prescott and his methods. She took no pleasure in seeing any horse fail, especially one being pushed beyond its capabilities. Her prediction proved accurate. Monarch, perhaps confused by the conflicting signals from his rider or simply unable to execute the tight turn his body wasn't designed for, clipped the third barrel with his hindquarters. The barrel wobbled precariously, then toppled with a hollow boom that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. The 5-second penalty would ensure they were out of contention for a top place, but Diego continued the run, pushing Monarch to sprint for the finish line. As they crossed, the time flashed on the scoreboard, 18.73 seconds, plus the 5-second penalty for the downed barrel. It was a respectable time for a novice, but nowhere near competitive for the county rodeo. The crowd offered polite applause, acknowledging the effort, if not the result. But something was wrong with Monarch. Even from a distance, Sarah could see that the Thoroughbred's gait had changed as he slowed after crossing the finish line. There was a slight irregularity to his movement, a hesitation in his right front leg that sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. "He's favoring his right front," she said to Emma, who was already on her feet, her professional instincts triggered by the same observation. Before either of them could react further, Monarch stumbled, nearly going down on his knees before Diego managed to steady him. The Thoroughbred recovered his footing, but the damage was done. The irregularity in his gait was now obvious to everyone watching, a clear sign of injury. The crowd fell silent, the festive atmosphere evaporating in an instant. Injuries were an unfortunate reality in any equestrian sport, but they were especially sobering in a community where horses were not just competitors, but working partners and beloved companions. Diego quickly dismounted, his face etched with concern as he led Monarch from the arena. The official veterinarian rushed forward, and a small crowd gathered around the exit gate, Prescott pushing his way to the front with a thunderous expression. Sarah and Emma exchanged a glance, then both moved quickly down from the stands, their expertise and concern overriding any hesitation about involving themselves in Prescott's affairs. By the time they reached the gathering outside the arena, a heated argument was already underway. "It's just a strain," Prescott was insisting, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Wrap it and give him something for the pain. He'll be fine." The official veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, shook his head firmly. "I need to examine him properly, Mr. Prescott. Based on what I'm seeing, this could be a serious tendon injury. He needs rest and possibly imaging to determine the extent of the damage." "We have another event tomorrow," Prescott said dismissively. "He'll be recovered by then. Diego, get him ready to load. We're leaving." Diego hesitated, clearly torn between his employer's demands and his concern for the horse. "Mr. Prescott, I think Dr. Martinez is right. Monarch is in pain. Competing tomorrow could cause permanent damage." Prescott's face darkened. I don't pay you to think, Diego. I pay you to train my horse and follow my instructions." Sarah couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, aware that she was inserting herself into a volatile situation, but unable to stand by while Monarch's welfare was at risk. "Mr. Prescott, please listen to the professionals. Pushing Monarch to compete while he's injured won't just risk his future, it could end his career permanently. I've been there with Thunder. I know how hard it is to step back, but sometimes that's the only responsible choice." Prescott turned to her, his expression a mixture of surprise and fury at her intervention. For a moment it seemed he might lash out, but the presence of witnesses, including several respected members of the rodeo community, appeared to give him pause. "This is none of your business, Ms. Morgan," he said coldly. "Your own horse couldn't even make it to the competition. I'd say that disqualifies you from offering advice on mine." The barb stung, but Sarah held her ground. "This isn't about me or Thunder. It's about doing right by the animal that depends on you. Monarch is telling you he's hurt. The question is, are you going to listen?" A tense silence followed, broken only by Monarch's labored breathing and the occasional murmur from the gathered crowd. Dr. Martinez used the moment to continue his examination, gently palpating the thoroughbred's leg while Diego held him steady. "There's definite heat and swelling in the tendon," the veterinarian announced, his voice carrying the authority of his position. "This horse needs immediate attention and should not be transported without proper support for the leg. I'm officially recommending that he be taken to the clinic for further evaluation." Prescott looked as if he might argue further, but the murmurs from the crowd had grown louder, and several local officials were watching the scene with concerned expressions. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Fine, take him to the clinic, but I want a full report immediately, and I expect him to receive the best possible care." He turned to Diego, his voice lowering to a harsh whisper that Sarah could still hear from her position. "This is on you. You pushed him too hard in training, and now we have nothing to show for it but a lame horse and a wasted investment." With that, he turned and stalked away, leaving Diego to assist Dr. Martinez with Monarch. The crowd began to disperse, the excitement of the competition overshadowed by the sobering reminder of the risks inherent in asking animals to perform at the limits of their capabilities. Emma touched Sarah's arm gently. "Come on, there's nothing more we can do here. Dr. Martinez will take good care of Monarch." But Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away from the injured thoroughbred, her heart aching for an animal who had been asked to be something he wasn't, to perform beyond his natural abilities for the sake of human pride and ambition. In Monarch's suffering, she saw a reflection of what might have happened to Thunder had she ignored the warning signs and pushed him to compete despite his injury. "It didn't have to be this way," she said softly, as much to herself as to Emma. If only Prescott had been willing to listen. The drive back to the Morgan Ranch that evening was silent, Sarah's mind replaying the events of the day like a film she couldn't turn off. The image of Monarch limping from the arena, the flash of pain in the thoroughbred's eyes, the callous dismissal in Prescott's voice when he called the horse a wasted investment, all of it weighed heavily on her heart. Jack was waiting on the porch when she pulled up, his weathered face etched with concern. "Heard about what happened at the rodeo," he said as she climbed out of her truck. "News travels fast around here. How bad was it?" Sarah sighed, the exhaustion of the emotional day finally catching up to her. "Bad enough. Dr. Martinez took Monarch to the clinic for evaluation, but from what I could see, it's a serious tendon injury. The same kind Thunder had, maybe worse." Jack shook his head sadly. "Damn shame. Fine animal like that, pushed too hard, too fast." They walked together to the barn, drawn there by a shared need to check on Thunder. The quarter horse nickered softly when they entered, his head appearing over the stall door, ears pricked forward in greeting. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude as she approached him, running her hand along his strong neck. "Hey, buddy," she murmured. "You were right to tell us you weren't ready. Smart boy." Thunder nuzzled her shoulder as if in agreement, his warm breath against her neck a comforting reminder of the bond they shared. Sarah examined his injured leg, noting with satisfaction that the swelling had decreased significantly since that morning. Emma's treatment plan and Thunder's natural resilience were working together to heal the strain. "He's looking better," Jack observed, standing at her shoulder. "Amazing how quickly they can bounce back when given the chance." Sarah nodded, her thoughts turning back to Monarch. "I just wish Prescott had given Monarch the same chance. That horse wasn't ready for barrel racing. Anyone with experience could see it. But Prescott couldn't accept that reality didn't match his expectations." "Some people never learn that lesson," Jack replied, his voice carrying the wisdom of decades working with animals. "They think money and determination can overcome nature's limits. But a horse is what it is. You can train it, improve it, but you can't fundamentally change what it was born to be." They spent a quiet evening together, sharing a simple meal and discussing the other events from the rodeo, carefully avoiding further mention of Prescott or Monarch. It was a deliberate choice, Sarah knew, her father's way of helping her process the day without dwelling on aspects she couldn't control. The next morning, Sarah was surprised to see a familiar truck pulling up the driveway as she finished her morning chores. Diego Vasquez stepped out looking tired and uncomfortable, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a hesitant approach. "Ms. Morgan," he called, stopping a respectful distance from where she stood. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to speak with you about yesterday." Sarah set down the feed bucket she had been carrying and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Diego, how's Monarch doing?" A shadow crossed Diego's face. "Not good. Dr. Martinez confirmed a significant tear in the superficial digital flexor tendon. He'll recover with proper treatment, but his competition days are over, at least in barrel racing." The news, while not surprising given what she had witnessed, still hit Sarah hard. "I'm sorry to hear that. And Prescott? How did he take the news?" Diego's expression hardened. "About as well as you'd expect. He's already talking about selling Monarch once he's healed enough to be moved. Says he has no use for a broken racehorse." The callousness of the statement, though consistent with everything she knew about Prescott, still shocked Sarah. That's heartless. Monarch gave everything he had, trying to do what was asked of him. "Which is why I'm here," Diego said, his voice dropping slightly. "I'm resigning from Prescott Equestrian. After seeing how he responded to Monarch's injury, I can't continue to work for someone who views horses as disposable assets." Sarah studied Diego with new respect. Despite their positions on opposite sides of the competition, she recognized the courage it took to walk away from what was undoubtedly a lucrative position. "What will you do now?" Diego shrugged, a small smile softening his features. "Back to Texas, maybe. Or there's a training facility in Colorado that's been trying to recruit me. Somewhere I can work with horses, not investments." There was a moment of silence between them, a shared understanding of the values that had brought Diego to this decision, values that transcended competition and rivalry. "There's something else," Diego continued, his expression turning serious again. "Before I left, I overheard Prescott on the phone. He's not withdrawing from the rodeo circuit. He's already making arrangements to purchase another horse, a champion barrel racer from Oklahoma. He's determined to win the regional finals next month, to prove that his methods work." Sarah frowned, processing this information. The regional finals were the next major competition on the circuit, a prestigious event that drew competitors from several states. The winner would receive not only substantial prize money but also recognition that could lead to sponsorships and breeding opportunities. "He's missing the point entirely," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. After what happened with Monarch, he's still convinced that buying the best horse is the answer. That's Prescott, Diego replied with a grimace. He doesn't adapt, he doubles down. And he's especially determined now because of you. Me? Sarah asked, surprised. I'm not even competing. Diego's expression was grim. You challenged his worldview, suggested that his money and methods might not be enough. For someone like Prescott, that's unacceptable. He needs to prove you wrong, to validate his approach. The idea that she had become a target of Prescott's obsession with winning was unsettling. Sarah had never sought conflict or rivalry. She had simply stood up for what she believed was right for the horses in her care. After Diego left, promising to stay in touch regarding Monarch's progress, Sarah returned to the barn, her mind troubled by their conversation. Thunder greeted her with his usual gentle nicker, and she found herself drawn to his stall, seeking the comfort of his steady presence. "What do you think, Thunder?" she asked softly, stroking his forehead. "Should we just let Prescott have his victory, prove his point to the world that money can buy success?" Thunder snorted, tossing his head in a gesture that almost seemed like disagreement. Sarah smiled despite her troubled thoughts. "Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say." On impulse, she opened the stall door and led Thunder out into the center aisle of the barn. His movement was easier today, the limp less pronounced as he followed her willingly. When she asked him to walk in a circle around her, he complied without hesitation, his stride smooth and even. "Well, look at you," Sarah murmured, watching him closely for any signs of discomfort. "Someone's feeling better." As if to confirm her observation, Thunder broke into a gentle trot, circling her with an ease that suggested his injury was healing faster than expected. Sarah felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by caution. One good day didn't mean Thunder was fully recovered, and she wouldn't risk his long-term health by rushing him back into training. Still, as she led him back to his stall, an idea began to form in her mind. The regional finals were still a month away. With proper care and gradual conditioning, Thunder might, just might, be ready to compete by then. Not because she needed to beat Prescott or prove a point, but because she and Thunder deserved the chance to show what was possible when horse and rider worked as true partners, each respecting the other's needs and limitations. "Let's take it one day at a time," she told Thunder, giving him a final pat before closing the stall door. "No pressure, no expectations. We'll listen to your body and see where we are in a few weeks." As she turned to leave, Sarah was surprised to find her father standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on his face. "I know that look," he said. "You're plotting something." Sarah smiled back, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Maybe, but unlike Prescott, I'm going to let Thunder decide if he's ready. Not my pride, not my need to win, just what's right for him." Jack nodded, approval evident in his eyes. "That's my girl, and that's why, when the time comes, you'll have something Prescott never will." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "A partner who's giving his all because he wants to, not because he's being forced to. And in the end, that makes all the difference." The next 3 weeks passed in a careful rhythm of rehabilitation and assessment. Each day, Sarah worked with Thunder, gradually increasing the intensity of his exercise while remaining vigilant for any signs of pain or fatigue. Morning walks through the pasture became light trots, which eventually evolved into carefully monitored training sessions in the corral. Throughout it all, Emma visited regularly, her professional eye tracking Thunder's progress with cautious optimism. "I have to say, I'm impressed," Emma admitted during her third-week visit, running her hands along Thunder's right front leg. "The inflammation is completely gone, and he's showing no signs of discomfort even after yesterday's workout." Sarah, who had been holding her breath throughout the examination, felt a wave of relief. So you think he's healing well? Better than well, Emma replied, straightening up. It's almost remarkable, actually. Tendon injuries like this typically take much longer to heal completely. Thunder here is either exceptionally resilient or exceptionally lucky. Probably both. Sarah patted Thunder's neck affectionately. He's a fighter, always has been. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind increasingly over the past week. Do you think, would it be crazy to consider the regional finals? Emma's expression turned serious. A week ago, I would have said absolutely yes. That would be crazy. Now, she paused, considering Thunder's condition with professional thoroughness. It's still risky, Sarah. Even with his impressive recovery, he'll be more vulnerable to re-injury. But if you continue this gradual approach, build his strength carefully, and are willing to pull out at the first sign of trouble. She sighed. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it might be possible. Not advisable necessarily, but possible. That measured assessment was enough to fan the spark of hope Sarah had been nurturing. Not a burning desire to compete or win, but a quiet hope that she and Thunder might get another chance to show what they could accomplish together. Meanwhile, news of Prescott's activities traveled through the local grapevine. True to Diego's information, he had purchased a champion barrel racer, a quarter-horse mare named Fast Money, with an impressive competition record. Local reports suggested he had paid an astronomical sum, even higher than what he had invested in Monarch. He had also hired a new trainer, a woman known for her aggressive methods and consistent results. One afternoon, while Sarah was picking up supplies in town, she spotted a copy of the regional newspaper with Prescott's face prominently displayed on the front page. The headline read, "Tech Mogul Brings Professional Edge to Local Rodeo Scene." Curiosity getting the better of her, Sarah purchased a copy and read the article over lunch at the local diner. The piece was essentially a profile of Prescott and his equestrian ambitions, peppered with quotes that made Sarah's blood boil. The rodeo circuit has been dominated by amateurs and hobbyists for too long, Prescott was quoted saying. I'm bringing a professional approach, the best horses, the best trainers, the best techniques. It's time to elevate this sport to the next level. There was a brief mention of Monarch's unfortunate setback, framed as a minor obstacle in Prescott's grand plan rather than the career-ending injury it actually was. The article concluded with Prescott's confident prediction that his new horse, Fast Money, would demonstrate the superiority of professional methods at the upcoming regional finals. I'd say he's throwing down the gauntlet, commented Maggie Wilson, who had spotted Sarah reading the article and settled into the seat across from her. Making it personal, isn't he? Sarah folded the newspaper with deliberate calm. He can say whatever he wants. It doesn't change the reality of what happened to Monarch. Maggie's eyes were shrewd. Word around town is that Thunder's doing better, much better. Any chance you'll be at the regionals? Sarah hesitated, still uncomfortable making any definitive statements about their plans. We're taking it day by day. If Thunder's ready, and if I feel it's right for him, then maybe. But it's his call, not mine. Maggie nodded, understanding the philosophy that guided Sarah's approach. Well, if you do decide to compete, you should know that half the county would show up to support you. There's a lot of folks around here who weren't impressed by Prescott's show at the county rodeo, especially after what happened to that beautiful Thoroughbred. The conversation stayed with Sarah as she drove home, the newspaper folded on the passenger seat beside her. Prescott was making this into something bigger than a local competition. He was challenging the very culture and values of the community, suggesting that their approach to horsemanship was somehow inferior to his corporatized vision of the sport. Back at the ranch, Sarah found her father replacing fence posts in the north pasture. She parked nearby and walked over to help, handing him tools as he worked. You've been quiet with Thunder's training lately. Jack commented after they had worked in companionable silence for a while. "But I've noticed you're pushing a little harder each day. Got your eye on something?" Sarah nodded, deciding it was time to voice the plan that had been forming in her mind. "The regional finals. If Thunder stays on this trajectory, I think we might be ready." Jack straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana. "Because of Prescott? Because of what he said in that article?" "No," Sarah replied, then reconsidered. "Well, not entirely. I won't pretend it doesn't bother me, the way he talks about traditional horsemanship like it's backward or amateur. But that's not why I want to compete." She paused, searching for the right words. "I want to compete because Thunder deserves another chance. Because what we do together, the partnership we've built, is worth showing to the world. And yes, maybe a little bit because someone needs to demonstrate that there's more to success in this sport than buying the most expensive horse and hiring the most aggressive trainer." Jack studied his daughter's face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That sounds like the right reasons to me." He turned back to the fence post, hammering with renewed vigor. "If you decide to do this, you know your mother would be proud. She always said you had her spirit and her seat in the saddle." The mention of her mother brought a lump to Sarah's throat. Catherine Morgan had been a champion barrel racer in her day, known throughout the region for her graceful riding and deep connection with her horses. Sarah had learned everything she knew about horsemanship from watching her mother, absorbing not just techniques but values, the importance of patience, respect, and genuine partnership with the animals in her care. "Thanks, Dad," she said softly. "That means a lot." The next week brought a critical milestone in Thunder's recovery. For the first time since his injury flared up, Sarah set up the barrel pattern in the home arena. It wasn't a full-speed training session. She was still being cautious, but she needed to know how Thunder would respond to the specific movements required for competition. As she mounted, Sarah felt a familiar blend of nervousness and excitement, the pre-competition butterflies she had experienced countless times throughout her riding career. "Easy does it, Thunder," she murmured, gathering the reins. "Nothing to prove today, just seeing how it feels." Thunder seemed to understand, standing quietly as she settled into the saddle. When she gave the signal to begin, he moved forward willingly, his ears pricked forward with interest. They approached the first barrel at a controlled canter, and Sarah felt Thunder gather himself beneath her, preparing for the turn. This was the moment of truth, the movement that had caused his initial injury, the maneuver that would put the greatest strain on his healing tendon. Sarah kept her cues light, giving Thunder the freedom to adjust his approach based on his own comfort level. To her delight and relief, Thunder executed the turn smoothly, showing none of the hesitation or reluctance that would indicate pain. His body moved with the fluid grace that had made him such a successful competitor before his injury, pivoting around the barrel with precision before accelerating toward the second. By the time they completed the pattern, Sarah's face was split with a wide smile. It hadn't been their fastest run, not by a long shot, but it had been clean, and most importantly, Thunder had shown no signs of discomfort or limitation. As they cooled down, walking in easy circles around the arena, Sarah leaned forward to pat Thunder's sweaty neck. "Good boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That was perfect." The decision was made. Barring any setbacks in the coming days, she and Thunder would enter the regional finals. Not to prove Prescott wrong, not to win at any cost, but to demonstrate that the bond between horse and rider, built on mutual trust and respect, could achieve something truly special. That evening, Sarah made the call to register for the competition, a sense of quiet determination settling over her as she completed the paperwork. Whatever happened at the regionals, she would stay true to her principles, putting Thunder's well-being above all else. That was a victory Prescott could never understand, let alone achieve. The final week before the regional finals passed in a blur of careful preparation. Sarah maintained Thunder's training schedule, focusing on building his confidence without pushing his physical limits. Each session ended with Thunder showing more strength and enthusiasm, as if he sensed the importance of the challenge ahead. Emma visited for a final assessment 3 days before the competition, conducting a thorough examination of Thunder's previously injured leg. "I still can't believe how well he's recovered," she said, straightening up with a smile of genuine amazement. "If I hadn't seen the original injury myself, I'd hardly believe he'd been hurt at all." Sarah, who had been holding her breath throughout the examination, exhaled in relief. "So we're good to go?" Emma nodded, though her professional caution remained evident. "Physically, he's as ready as he can be. Just remember what we talked about. Listen to him during the competition. If you feel even the slightest hesitation or change in his movement, don't push it." "I promise," Sarah replied solemnly. "This is about more than winning." The evening before they were set to leave for the regional finals, Sarah sat on the fence of the corral, watching Thunder graze peacefully in the golden light of sunset. Jack joined her, passing over a steaming mug of coffee. "Nervous?" he asked, settling beside her. Sarah considered the question, taking a sip of the strong brew. "Not in the usual way. I'm not worried about the competition itself. I'm just hoping I'm making the right decision for Thunder." Jack nodded, understanding her concern. "You know, your mother used to say that horses tell you everything you need to know if you're willing to listen. Thunder's been telling you he's ready. Trust that." They sat in companionable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land that had been in the Morgan family for generations. This ranch, this way of life, represented values that couldn't be bought or sold. A heritage of respect for the land and the animals that shared it, a tradition of horsemanship that viewed riders and horses as partners rather than master and servant. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Jack said finally, "you've already won the most important victory. You brought Thunder back from an injury that could have ended his life, and you did it with patience and respect. That's worth more than any trophy." Sarah leaned her head against her father's shoulder, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "Thanks, Dad. I needed to hear that." The regional finals were held at the state fairgrounds, a much larger venue than the county rodeo arena. When Sarah arrived with Thunder the next morning, she was momentarily overwhelmed by the scale of the event. Multiple competition areas, professional vendors, and a much larger crowd than she was accustomed to created an atmosphere of excitement and pressure. As she led Thunder toward the check-in area, Sarah noticed the substantial media presence. Local television crews, photographers, and reporters milled about, capturing the spectacle. A flash of irritation ran through her when she spotted a cluster of journalists surrounding none other than Richard Prescott, who was giving what appeared to be an impromptu press conference beside his elaborate trailer setup. "Focus on what matters," Sarah reminded herself, turning her attention back to Thunder. The quarter horse seemed unfazed by the busy environment, walking calmly beside her with the steady confidence that had always been his hallmark. At the check-in table, the registrar looked up in surprise when Sarah gave her name. "Sarah Morgan, with Thunder?" She shuffled through her papers, finding the entry. "I didn't expect... that is, after what happened at the county rodeo." "We've recovered," Sarah said simply. "We're ready to compete." The woman nodded, handing over the competitor's packet with a smile that suggested more than professional courtesy. "Well, I speak for a lot of folks when I say we're glad to see you here. Good luck today." As Sarah led Thunder toward the warm-up area, she was approached by several other competitors, many of whom she knew from years on the local circuit. Their greetings were warm, their expressions reflecting genuine pleasure at seeing Thunder back in competition. It was a stark contrast to the isolation that surrounded Prescott's elaborate setup, where hired hands moved with professional efficiency but little evident joy. Sarah was adjusting Thunder's saddle when a shadow fell across her work. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Richard Prescott. "Ms. Morgan," he said, his tone suggesting mild surprise, though his eyes revealed he had sought her out deliberately. "I didn't expect to see you here. I was under the impression that Thunder's career was over." Sarah straightened, meeting his gaze steadily. "We've been fortunate. Thunder's recovery exceeded everyone's expectations." Prescott's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed Thunder with a calculating gaze. "Indeed. Well, I commend your persistence, though I must say, sentiment seems to be trumping good sense. Competing after such an injury seems reckless." "Thunder will tell me if he's not ready," Sarah replied evenly. "Unlike some, I trust my horse's judgment." The barb wasn't subtle, and Prescott's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his polished smile. "Well, I wish you luck. You'll need it. Fast Money has been breaking records in training. I believe her time today will set a new regional standard." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah with a familiar mix of irritation and determination. She reminded herself that Prescott's provocations were designed to unsettle her, to make her focus on him rather than on what truly mattered, her partnership with Thunder. The barrel racing event was scheduled for early afternoon, following the calf roping and steer wrestling competitions. Sarah used the morning to acclimate Thunder to the environment, walking him around the grounds and allowing him to observe the activities from a comfortable distance. By the time they returned to the preparation area, he was relaxed and focused, showing none of the stress that affected many horses in such high-energy settings. As competitors began warming up for the barrel racing event, Sarah couldn't help but notice Fast Money, Prescott's new champion. The mare was a stunning palomino with powerful hindquarters and an athletic build that bespoke generations of careful breeding. Unlike Monarch, Fast Money was clearly bred and trained for barrel racing, moving with the quick, agile turns essential to the discipline. Prescott's new trainer, a stern-faced woman named Vanessa Reed, worked the horse with mechanical precision. Fast Money responded to her cues promptly, but Sarah noted the same absence of joy, of partnership, that had characterized Monarch's training. The horse was a tool being calibrated for maximum performance, not a living being engaged in a collaborative effort. When the competition began, Sarah watched the early competitors with careful attention, noting how the horses handled the arena's footing and how the barrels were positioned. Each rider brought their own style and approach, some favoring tight turns that risked knocking over barrels, others taking slightly wider paths to maintain speed throughout the pattern. The announcer's voice echoed through the facility as rider after rider completed the course, their times flashing on the electronic scoreboard. The competition was fierce, with several riders posting impressive times that would have won most local events. And then, it was Fast Money's turn. The crowd's energy shifted as Prescott's horse entered the arena, the media attention and pre-event publicity having created a buzz of anticipation. Vanessa Reed sat the saddle with professional composure, her face set in determined concentration as she guided the palomino to the starting position. The buzzer sounded, and Fast Money exploded from the starting line with breathtaking acceleration. The mare's long strides devoured the distance to the first barrel, where she executed a turn so tight that Sarah found herself holding her breath, certain the barrel would fall. But it remained standing as Fast Money pivoted with precision and launched toward the second barrel. Throughout the pattern, Fast Money moved with the practiced efficiency of a machine, each turn calculated to shave fractions of seconds off her time. When she crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted in applause, and the scoreboard flashed a time that placed her firmly in first position, a full half-second ahead of the previous leader. Prescott's face broke into a triumphant smile as Vanessa rode Fast Money from the arena. He accepted congratulations from spectators and officials with the air of a man whose investments had once again yielded the expected returns. When his gaze found Sarah in the preparation area, he raised an eyebrow in a gesture that clearly said, "Beat that." Sarah turned away, focusing on her final preparations with Thunder. She checked his leg wraps one last time, adjusted the saddle, and then simply stood with him, her forehead resting against his neck, drawing strength from his solid presence. "It's just you and me, Thunder," she murmured. "Like always. No pressure, no expectations. We run our race, nobody else's." As the competition continued, Sarah watched the scoreboard with growing awareness of the challenge they faced. Fast Money's time remained untouched, a benchmark that seemed increasingly out of reach as rider after rider fell short. The pressure mounted with each competitor who failed to match the Palomino's performance, reinforcing the narrative Prescott had been promoting, that his professional approach represented the future of the sport. Finally, the announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Next up, from Morgan Ranch, Sarah Morgan riding Thunder." The moment had arrived. Sarah mounted Thunder with practiced ease, settling into the saddle that had come to feel like home. As they entered the arena, a surprising sound reached her ears. Cheers, louder and more enthusiastic than those that had greeted any previous competitor, including Fast Money. Looking around, she realized that many in the crowd were familiar faces from her community, people who had made the trip specifically to support her and Thunder. The knowledge that so many believed in them, not because they were favorites to win, but because they represented values worth supporting, filled Sarah with a calm determination. As they approached the starting position, she leaned forward to whisper in Thunder's ear, "Whatever happens, we do this together. I trust you." The buzzer sounded and time seemed to slow. Sarah gave Thunder the lightest of cues, and he responded instantly, launching forward with powerful strides that belied his recent injury. The crowd's cheers faded into the background as Sarah's world narrowed to the immediate connection between herself and Thunder. The rhythmic pounding of his hooves against the arena dirt, the steady breathing that matched her own, the subtle shifts of his body telegraphing his intentions. As they approached the first barrel, the one that would require Thunder to turn on his previously injured leg, Sarah felt a momentary hesitation in his stride. For a fraction of a second, she considered pulling back, easing the pressure, protecting him from potential re-injury. But then she felt something else. Thunder gathering himself, making his own decision, drawing on a well of courage and determination that transcended human understanding. He took the turn not with the mechanical precision of Fast Money, but with a fluid grace that spoke of years of partnership and mutual trust. Sarah moved with him instinctively, their bodies working in perfect harmony, each anticipating the other's movements without conscious thought. They cleared the first barrel with room to spare, and Thunder accelerated toward the second with renewed confidence. The second and third barrels passed in a blur of speed and coordinated movement. At each turn, Thunder seemed to gain strength rather than lose it, his stride lengthening, his body finding the perfect balance between control and speed. As they thundered toward the finish line, Sarah could feel the energy of the crowd rising, could sense that something special was happening, though she remained focused entirely on Thunder, on the powerful animal beneath her, giving everything he had to this moment they shared. They crossed the finish line at full speed, and only then did Sarah allow herself to hear the roar of the crowd, to look up at the scoreboard where their time flashed in bright digital numbers. 15:32 seconds, 0.2 of a second faster than Fast Money's supposedly unbeatable run. The arena erupted. People leaped to their feet, cheering and applauding as Sarah slowed Thunder to a controlled stop and patted his neck with trembling hands. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeaker, barely audible above the crowd's reaction. "Ladies and gentlemen, a new leader, Sarah Morgan and Thunder with a time of 15:32 seconds. Sarah dismounted, her legs unsteady with adrenaline and emotion. She buried her face in Thunder's neck, overwhelmed by what they had accomplished together. The quarter horse stood calmly amid the chaos, his sides heaving from exertion, but his eyes bright with what Sarah could only interpret as satisfaction, the look of an athlete who had met a challenge on his own terms and prevailed. As they exited the arena, Sarah was engulfed by well-wishers, fellow competitors offering congratulations, local supporters expressing their pride, even members of the media requesting impromptu interviews. Through it all, she kept one hand on Thunder, grounding herself in the reality of his presence, in the tangible evidence of their partnership. From across the preparation area, Sarah caught sight of Prescott, his face a study in barely controlled fury. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment she saw something crack in his polished facade, a glimpse of a man confronting the possibility that some things truly couldn't be bought, that there were values in this world that transcended his understanding of success. The remaining competitors completed their runs, but none came close to matching the times set by Thunder and Fast Money. When the final results were announced, confirming Sarah and Thunder's victory, Jack enveloped his daughter in a bear hug, his weathered face alight with pride. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "So damn proud." The award ceremony was a blur of applause and photographs, of Thunder standing patiently beside Sarah as she accepted the championship trophy and prize check. Throughout it all, she remained acutely aware of Prescott watching from the sidelines, his expression unreadable behind his designer sunglasses. It wasn't until the formal proceedings had concluded that Prescott approached her, Vanessa Reed trailing a few steps behind. Fast Money had already been loaded into their trailer, their elaborate setup being dismantled by efficient staff members. "Congratulations," Prescott said, the word clearly costing him effort. "That was unexpected." Sarah nodded, accepting the grudging acknowledgement without comment. She was surprised when Prescott continued, his tone shifting to something less guarded. "I don't understand it," he admitted, glancing at Thunder with genuine puzzlement. "Fast Money's bloodlines are impeccable. Her training regimen is scientifically optimized by every measurable metric she should have won today." "There are some things you can't measure, Mr. Prescott," Sarah replied, stroking Thunder's neck. "Trust, partnership, the willingness to give everything not because you're forced to, but because you want to." Prescott frowned, clearly struggling with a concept that didn't fit neatly into his worldview of resources and returns. "Perhaps," he said finally. "In any case, you've proven your point, for whatever that's worth." As he turned to leave, Sarah found herself calling after him. "Mr. Prescott." He paused, looking back. "What happened to Monarch? If you're planning to sell him once he's recovered." A shadow crossed Prescott's face. "What concern is that of yours?" "I'd like to buy him," Sarah said, the decision crystallizing in her mind even as she spoke the words. "Not to compete with him, his racing days are over, as you said, but to give him the retirement he deserves after everything he gave trying to please you." Prescott stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head with what might have been grudging respect. "I'll have my attorney contact you, though I doubt you can afford my asking price." "Try me," Sarah replied steadily. "Some things are worth more than money." After Prescott departed, Jack approached, having overheard the exchange. "You sure about this, Sarah? Taking on another horse, especially one with Monarch's medical needs, won't be cheap or easy." Sarah nodded, her mind made up. "I couldn't save him from what Prescott put him through, but I can make sure the rest of his life is different. He deserves that much." Jack smiled, squeezing her shoulder. "Like I said, your mother would be proud." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood at the fence of the Morgan Ranch's largest pasture, watching as Thunder and Monarch grazed side by side. The Thoroughbred's recovery had been slow but steady, his injured tendon healing enough to allow him a comfortable retirement, though he would never again withstand the rigors of competition. The purchase hadn't been easy. Prescott had initially set an exorbitant price, seemingly to discourage her. But word of Sarah's intention had spread through the community, and to her amazement, a fund had been established to help cover the cost. Local ranchers, fellow competitors, and even casual spectators who had witnessed Thunder's victory contributed what they could, turning the purchase of Monarch into a community statement about the values they wished to preserve. Emma joined her at the fence, observing the two horses with professional satisfaction. "They look good together," she commented. "Wouldn't have predicted that a champion thoroughbred and a ranch quarter horse would become such friends." Sarah smiled, watching as the horses moved across the pasture with easy grace, both now sound and content in their shared home. "They understand each other," she said simply. "They've both been through the fire and come out the other side. And in the process, changed a few minds around here about what really matters in horsemanship," Emma added. "Even Prescott's new trainer has been asking questions about your methods. Rumor has it she's reconsidering her approach." Sarah nodded, taking in this unexpected ripple effect of their victory. The trophy from the regional finals sat on a shelf in the Morgan living room, a tangible reminder of what she and Thunder had accomplished together. But the real victory was here in front of her, two horses moving freely across open pasture, their spirits unbroken by the demands humans had placed upon them, their trust intact despite the challenges they had faced. "In the end," Sarah said softly, "it was never about beating Prescott or proving a point. It was about honoring the partnership, the trust that makes everything else possible." As if hearing her words, Thunder lifted his head from grazing and looked toward her, his intelligent eyes finding hers across the distance. In that shared gaze was everything that mattered, a bond forged through patience and respect, tested by hardship, and ultimately triumphant, not because of extraordinary talent or resources, but because of the simple, profound power of mutual trust and genuine partnership.